Hello audience. In this video I'm going to install the right front door and the cowl panel. Now I spent a few days thinking about what to do next on this, and I decided the most critical, most difficult, and probably most important thing to get done would be the doors. Getting them installed and aligned and fitting properly. So that's what I'm going to concentrate on now. So it's finally time to make a decision about the door hinges, and I decided I'm just going to use the later ones. There's not really any point to custom building or paying extra money for the right ones, being as how they look almost identical when they're installed. So what I'm going to do is free these up because all of them I have are rusted together, and I'm going to straighten them out because both of these plates need to be flat. That's how they started out. So you can see one of them's bent a little bit, and this is pretty common. This is one way of aligning the doors, is to bend the hinges around, and I may end up doing that on this, but I need to start somewhere, so we'll straighten them out first. And this one's working. We'll worry about cleaning the rust off of it later when it's ready for final assembly. Now, you may notice these have 7 screw holes on each side. Now, just to put it together for now, I'm only going to use 2 or 3 screws, because I'm sure it's going to need to be relocated and shimmed a bunch of times. But when assembling it finished, we'll use all 7. Now I'm going to nail the side panel on temporarily, and so you can see I've notched it for the door striker and I've drilled the nail holes already. So let's see how it fits. And the panel fits pretty good. It's just a little bit too tall, about 3/16 of an inch taller than the frame. Now, when I put the wood frame together, I measured just about everything against the other side except the overall height. And I just did that. I ran a straight edge from here to the other side. And this side is actually an 1/8 inch lower. So I'm going to add an 1/8 inch shim between here and here on the front and back, and that should fix that. Alright, I got that taken care of. Now you may notice there's no elaborate joining technique with these. I just have one piece of wood sitting on top of the other one, and I have a screw going through them to hold it together. Now I deliberately made them this way because it's really easy to readjust the dimensions, and I figured I'd have to do a little of that all around. Now when it's time for the final assembly, I'll probably make an actual piece of wood this thickness and then glue it in, but this'll do for now. And here's the door frame. It's just the outer perimeter of it right now, just roughly cut out, but it's good enough to start aligning it. So now I'd like to go over a few things about the door frame. And one thing I discovered when making this is right at the bottom of the door frame, because of the way the hinges are designed, the door moves slightly back when you open it, and because of that, the angle that this is cut, it was just cut 90 degrees from here, but I had to step it in a little further than that, so it would clear the body. Yeah, you can kind of see it better that way. That's one thing I didn't think to check with any of the cars I got patterns from. I kind of suspected I would have to do that. Problem is now the gap on the inside is noticeably wider because of all the wood I took out of the door. So before final assembly, I'm going to take these posts off and glue a strip of wood to this and recut it so the angle is out a little more to match the door. Now, like I've mentioned before, the 13 bodies, the door goes all the way down to the bottom of the body, and what that means is the sill has to be notched out to clear it. Now, these are already 1/4 of an inch narrower than they should be. I plan to add a 1/4 inch shim everywhere else except where the doors go. Actually, they should be notched in even more than this, but I'm redesigning the door frame. Originally, the sheet metal just went underneath and nailed to it, so the frame had to be a little thicker than this. But what I'm going to do is just trim it off and put a piece of sheet metal down here, and then just going to bend the tab all the way over and weld it. So it's going to be a lot narrower than it was originally, which means I don't have to take as much wood out of the sills, which will make them stronger. And now we'll begin fitting the door panel. Now, as you can see, I've already notched it for the hinges and drilled the nail holes in it. Now, you know how I said a coach building, it has its own problems and have its own different way of thinking? Well, this is a really good example of it. Now, I've installed the door panel. The gap is pretty much even with the side panel, a steady about 1/8 inch, more or less. And there's about 1/8 inch height difference between the door and the side panel. The door is about 1/8 inch lower than that. Now, the wood behind this is level with the other side. The door post that the hinge is attached to is also level with the other side. The door is parallel with this. It's also parallel with the side panel, which we can tell because I run a straight edge against the bead and it lines up perfectly with the side panel. Now I could angle the post, which will move the door more like that, which could line it up, but it's going to make the gap really big here and really small on the bottom. Also, it's going to make this line inconsistent. And another thing I'll point out is I ran a straight edge against the side panel and the quarter panel, and the beads line up on that. So we really don't want to mess with this panel. We want to leave it right where it is. So I've been thinking about this for quite some time, and what I'm going to do is detach the post that's holding the hinges and raise it up 1/8 inch. And that'll raise the entire door up. It'll line up with this. The only thing is the front of the body is going to end up being 1/8 inch higher on the right side than the left, but that's not really all that much. I've seen greater variances than that on factory bodies, even on newer cars. Alright, that did the trick. It's now even up here. Now, the door gap is opened up here to about 1/4 of an inch, which is not really a problem because it's too tight up here anyway. You have to open up the hinges or something, so it'll all work out pretty even when it's done. So now we can pretty much nail these on semi-permanently and then start working on the cowl panel. Now I'm attaching this with upholstery tacks. Reason being, I want nails that are really easy to remove because I know I'm going to have to take this back off later. But when we start nailing it on for good, that'll be a different story. Well, this is kind of surprising. This panel fits almost perfectly. It's just a little bit snug, fits around the front, the top, and the bottom. Considering I had no wood frame when I made this, and I never measured anything from it when I was making this frame, just copied the other side, it really shouldn't fit as good as it does. Not that I'm complaining. Now, it does need a little more work. It's bulging out a bit here, it needs a little heat shrinking. But what I'm going to do right now is mark where it's supposed to be bent over here, then bend it in, put the notches in it for the door hinges, drill the nail holes, and then we'll put it all back together and see how it looks. Okay, it's back together. Now, down at the bottom here, the door was hitting, so I hammered it in a little. Clean it up later. Now, the problem is the gap here ended up not being too tight. It looks right on target, actually. And the gap back here is still too big. So, I'm not sure exactly what to do about this. What I'm going to try to do is shim the hinge set back a little bit and try to even out the gaps and see what they look like then. And that seemed to have done nothing. So, I'll try a bigger shim. Well, I fussed with this thing for a while, and I did manage to get the gap evened out. I got it to about 3/16 on each side. I don't know why, but I wasn't satisfied with that, so I just walked away from it, and now it's the next day, looking at it, and it looks great. It looks very pleasing. Now, what's even more important is the gap is even from top to bottom on both sides. So for all practical purposes, this part of the body is pretty much done. I mean, it still needs a little fussing around the corners, a little fine tuning, but nothing needs to be removed or cut and welded or remade or anything like that. This is pretty much good to go. So the next thing I'm going to do is install the door latch. I've said quite a bit about the door hinges, but I haven't said a word about the latches yet. Reason being, way back at the beginning of the project, I already had it figured out what I was going to do. I was just going to make them. I've made door latches for antique cars before, and this is a pretty simple design as far as door latches go. This is one that I made already. Now from here forward is the only visible part. This is based off an original. The rest of it is kind of my own design. This handle probably doesn't need this much curve in it. I just kind of was making it up as I went along. This one I kind of just made for practice. It came out kind of rough. I don't know if I'm going to use it or make another one, but I need to make 2 others anyway, so when I do, I'll show you more in depth how I make these. Now this handle obviously is not finished. In 1913, the handle went all the way through the top of the door. I think that was the only year they did that. So if I use this, what I'm going to do is make the handle and then just weld it on here, which I'll do later during final assembly. It's kind of a standard design that several pre-war cars use. It's kind of based off the door latch you'd find in a house. And this is the striker for it, which I also made. It's missing 2 mounting holes. I was just too lazy to drill them. But anyway, this goes on the door post and this attaches to the door. And when it closes, this thing's spring loaded and it locks into place like that, and that's what holds it. Now these do work, but they have one slight problem with them, particularly with the open cars. It only works if the door is just the right distance away from the door jamb. So if the body twists in just the right way and the door separates from the jamb, just so, there's nothing holding the door shut and it'll just fly open. Now it's not really a problem on closed cars because the roof structure holds the door posts in shape. And it's not really a problem with the Model T either because the doors are really small and the seats are way behind them, so the passengers don't lean on the doors on turns or anything like that. Now, beginning in 1914, a new door latch design was used by Ford. I don't have a proper 1914 latch to use as an example, but they function about the same as this one. As you can see, it's pretty much the same, only the latch assembly is enclosed on this, and this is the striker that it goes with. Now, the clever thing about this is it works the same way. When the door closes and it latches, the striker is encased inside the latch, which means you cannot pull them apart. So this holds the body together, and it's also safer because it holds the doors closed during a collision. There's no way to separate the door from the post unless you use the handle. And it's pretty much the kind of design modern cars use today. I mean, they're constructed entirely different, but the same principle. Now I thought of using these style latches and just making a early looking handle for it, but the difference between them is pretty obvious and it's really easy to tell, and the upgrade is just not really all that necessary. Anyway, I'll install it and see how it works. Now you may notice this striker is on kind of an angle compared to the wood. Now, I did this on purpose because, like I said, eventually I'm going to have to take this off and add wood to it so I can recut it at an angle. And this is pretty much installed at that angle. So when I do all that, this will be level with the post. Now, ready for this? How about that? First try, and it works perfectly. This is great. We now have a functioning door on this thing. Well, that's it for this video. Now, again, we've made a big step forward on this thing, and though there's still a long way to go on it, the end is really in sight now, so it's really getting fun. Now, I plan to keep working on the doors. I've started making the wood structure for the back of the body, and I'm gonna start making the right rear door and get that fitted, and then probably start working on the left side, which will be easier because there's only one door. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.